All right, today I think we've got a pretty fascinating and ultimately a good story, even though I could totally see how headlines could be a little bit spooking. So let's hop into things. I'll kick it off with a quote. Here it is. "We don't run the business for monetary gain. The humbleness and the desire to just make great games is the only reason we exist." I mean, come on, that is exactly what you want to hear from anyone in a leadership position in the games industry. And those are, in fact, the words of Johan Pilestedt, who is the founder of Arrowhead Game Studios, of course, developers of Helldivers, and that was him speaking to GameIndustry.biz about their approach to making the game. Overall, he comes across as being humble, meaningful, and focused on just making a great environment for people to make games that people love. And that is why, in that interview, he also said he's stepping down. Yeah, he is stepping down as CEO of the company because for him, he's actually understanding as a leader where he needs to be. This is a really fascinating story, and what's best for our team is you checking out today's sponsor and supporting us on Bellular.games. And funny enough, on the whole thing with Johan, to me personally, very big mood. Very, oh yeah, we'll get into that a bit later, but basically over at Bellular.games, that's where we publish Loading Screen every single day. So if you want a release radar of games that are coming out, maybe you want to know if they're fun or not, we do that in Loading Screen every day. If you want all of the news stories as they happen that we put together, that's a Loading Screen. You, of course, get access to our videos ad-free, and as soon as they're ready to go out, obviously, we got bills to pay to actually do this channel at the scale that we do, to have enough of a team so that we're actually able to bring loads of stories together and loads of different sources together, and I suppose really do the synthesis, which is what I see to be the value, I suppose. It's like the mission of what we do. So a thank you to everyone at Bellular.games who supports us, and if you want to check out what's there, well, the link is Bellular.games. Okay, let's talk about Johan and Arrowhead. So he was talking to GameIndustry.biz about stepping down as CEO, and ultimately it's something he's framing as good news. He says that it's basically for the good of everybody, including players. Now, he's not leaving the company. Instead, he'll be having a say over creative decisions and long-term vision stuff, but basically the day-to-day running of the company, business conversations that are pretty important that have to happen, those are just not going to be the things that he's doing. And ultimately says it's what he wants and he thinks it'll be best for everybody. Here's just a quote, right? Him explaining it. "I've been thinking about the journey ahead for Arrowhead, the future games we're going to be making, and running the organization beyond the 120 or so developers we have currently." Which, by the way, yeah, that's around how many people are making a game like Helldivers 2, and of course, Helldivers was made over a pretty long span of time. He goes on to say, though, "I realize that running an organization of over 100 people to however large it's going to get, it means I will have to choose between deepening my love for game creation or the business track." That is a pretty big thing. Now, what's important here is that this is not a decision that he's making rashly or like a knee-jerk thing. It's not a decision he's made in response to, say, the recent arguments that have been happening with PlayStation, just all of that chaos. Basically, he says it's forward-looking. So he said, "Over the last year, going to the launch of Helldivers 2, I've been pulled more towards the business side of things and not been able to focus as much on the creative side. That's made me realize I needed to make some decisions, both for the success of the business and also myself." So basically, he's getting out of his own way so that he can focus on the things that are important. And to be honest with you, that is big mood for me, and I guess I'll share a little bit of kind of my own story running into this problem in a little bit. But I think the big thing, though, we have so many stories of just straight up mismanagement in gaming from individuals who, maybe they've got the skills as a creative lead, but they just don't have the management skills. Or maybe they do have the management skills, but it's just not what they're passionate about, right? Because making a good game requires an insane number of skill sets. You've got to have a great eye for music, you've got to have a great eye for hiring people for talent. There's a whole bunch of technical stuff you've got to understand. Creative stuff you've got to understand. Art stuff you've got to understand. That is hard, and to get all of that in one person is extremely unlikely. It's why you have so many examples of, and I'm not doing this to rail on the guy, but say Ken Levine, right? Ken Levine, of course, BioShock and many other fantastic games. He does have a really great track record. That being said, BioShock Infinite was a bit of a hell shit show to develop. Of course, we all know how with BioShock Infinite, the game that we got didn't really match the aspirations that were initially shown off to us. Of course, he had a follow-up company, and it's taken them a long-ass time to make anything. And when you actually hear people talk about working there, it's basically oh yeah, Ken's got things that he's great at, but things that he's really not great at. and that gets in the way of us making a game. So Ken Levine is one example of that. There's been like mixed reports out of Moon Studios, who are the Ori and No Rest for the Wicked people. So there's that. There's the Lego Star Wars game, right? Where it turned out that, like, man, to make Lego games, they really had to grind very, very hard. So basically, this is good. The guys realize that if he stays as CEO, it will likely lead to problems either for the company or for him personally or for both. So he's basically made that decision before problems arise. That's good. That's responsible. It's forward-looking. It's exactly the sort of thing we need to see more of. I mean, hey, imagine if for every Ken Levine we had, there was also somebody else helping that Ken Levine run a really good company and also maybe holding that Ken Levine to account on deadlines and things. Maybe then we would actually get, you know, the best of people's talents, but maybe also not have the downsides of them not exactly being balanced in their skill set, which of course I wouldn't expect them to be. Your job's to be a creative director. I'm not going to blame you for not being amazing at other things. Now, let's talk about the person who has been hired here. So, Johan has hired the man who actually helped launch Arrowhead's Magicka at Paradox. And yes, remember Magicka from like back in the day? I remember the Total Biscuit video on Magicka. Like, that's the same Arrowhead. Like, that's where they've came from. So, they've hired that guy who, yes, launched it at Paradox, and then did some further work as the chairman of publisher Hooded Horse. Of course, Hooded Horse have been in the headlines lately because of Manor Lords, and broadly speaking, they seem to really have their head screwed on and absolutely have an eye for talent because they got other interesting games in their portfolio as well. So this guy is called Shams Georgiani. I think that's the correct pronunciation. So he's actually worked with Arrowhead before, he's worked with Johan before, and basically seems to understand their aims, right? Now, this is an important thing because as much as, like, in doing this story, my reading of things, and I suppose I respect how Johan's handled things when it came to problems that have happened with the game, be it some of the game balancing things, be it, be it the obvious stuff with PlayStation. I do feel like he's been as, like, frank, honest, and reasonable with fans as he really can be, right? So I've respected that, and I think that's why I am willing to take him at his word. Very obviously, you could read into this thinking, oh dear, they've been successful, CEO's stepping down, changing his role. Oh dear, like, yes, maybe this will be good for Johan and co, like, creatively, but what if the new CEO rams in bad things and stuff, goes in a bad direction? I absolutely understand why we would be worried about that. There are so many examples of maybe a company that we love being acquired or having a change of leadership and that going bad. I mean, if you liked a lot of great games from the 90s and 2000s, there's just a graveyard of studios that were ruined in that sort of way. So I get the fear. Here is what Georgiani has said, though, to GameIndustry.biz. The goal of the studio is to make really great co-op games. We want to turn Arrowhead into a flagship studio where people who want to make these kind of games say to themselves, I want to work at Arrowhead. When we were growing up, I really wanted to work at Blizzard. It was one of the bucket list places to work at. I think Arrowhead has the potential to be that. Also, Lamau, because yes, while Blizzard was doing pretty amazing things in the early 2000s, yeah, obviously things didn't go great. But then again, when it was in those early days, even though there were problems at Blizzard, a lot of us on the outside, we just did not know about those problems. And from all that we could see, like, it was the place you would want to go to work in video games. So I understand what he's saying there, and I can absolutely see a legion of up-and-coming game designers seeing Arrowhead and Helldivers as absolutely a North Star in their career development. I'd certainly hope that in referencing Blizzard, it's also kind of him referencing that not everything was great, and you need to make sure that those sorts of problems don't happen. But basically, this is what he brings to the table, right? So time for a quote. What I did at Paradox, where I joined as the 23rd person and then helped grow the company into the behemoth it was about organization, leadership, and business focus. It's a lot of the, frankly, boring business administration stuff that is a necessary part of running a company, which is hard to do when you're also juggling the chairman's hat and the creative director's hat and being the one who is in the trenches doing a lot of the designing that Johan has been doing over the years. Noble goal. And I guess if Helldivers is something that was creatively spearheaded by Johan, it's a similar thing for Helldivers 2, and obviously there'll be so many other collaborators, but do you want the person who was, at the very least, a key creative force in those games to then be saddled with a company that's maybe 3 times the size he's used to, where he's just doing a bunch of business stuff that he's not passionate about. To me, that seems like a fantastic way to absolutely take the passion out of game development and I guess just lead to us getting slop, which we don't want. Now, obviously, there's an elephant in the room with Paradox. Big picture, success story. Now, though, they're struggling with, they've got a lot bigger. They have so many games under development, and they have genuinely cocked up an ungodly amount of stuff lately. So, I mean, you guys know I'm very critical of a lot of the stuff that's happened with Paradox, just specifically because whenever there are niche gaming communities who are specifically served by a very small number of games, I think it's extremely important that those companies are kind of held to account, because it's not like there is a competitor for you to go to elsewhere. So that's why I think it is important to hold them to account. Undoubtedly, though, a lot of things did go right with Paradox. That's why they're in the position where they are now. So big picture, as much as I initially saw the headline and thought, oh no, why is he going? Actually, no, this does look like a pretty good move. Obviously, the proof of the pudding will be in the eating. If things radically go in a bad direction, then yeah, you can be suspicious. Do I think that will happen, though? No, I don't. I think, though, that they are a company that's a little bit embattled and is having a little bit of a struggle. Now, it's a struggle because they have a really good problem. You only have the sorts of problems they have when you're a really big success. And that's probably one of the things that's been a driving force in Johan's thinking. You have this massive success. You're doing the monthly war bonds, because they have had a rough time with balance. And there definitely has been, let's just say, when you have an extremely highly engaged community, that does cut in both directions. So there's a lot of stuff that they do have to get right. And as you scale a company, I mean, as so many of us know, if you double the size of a team, that team is not going to be twice as efficient. And in many ways, it's a game of trying to get that scale and the benefits of that scale, while just diminishing the inherent downsides that come with just needing more and more and more layers of management. I do think this seems like a real solid way of dealing with things, and it's one that I definitely empathize with on a personal level. Look, so I have my skill set. My skill set does not, it does not cover being amazing at every single little detail. I am kind of that, you could maybe say, stereotypical, I find new shiny things to be interesting. I love starting projects. I love coming up with ideas. I kind of just love fucking delivering stuff and doing the core of the work. But you see, when it comes to a lot of that business stuff, that management stuff, I absolutely hate it. But it is important. Even take sponsorships. So that was all being done by me. And that was really bad. It was good in some ways in that we were able to increase revenue by taking on those sponsors. And that did mean could hire more people, could bump up wages, keep competitive, more job security, and that stuff's good, right? The downside is whenever I was doing all of that work and sponsors, the time I was putting into getting sponsors so I could pay the bills was literally time where I wasn't reviewing somebody's script, reviewing a video, recording a video, writing a script, researching something. So one of the things that I did, I believe last year, was getting, in this case specifically a talent manager, but basically he handles all of that stuff, lead generation and all of that for me, which is brilliant because I've been able to have those benefits, right? Of, the revenue goes up, which means we can make more content, we can invest more in our content, but without the downside of, and now I literally can't record videos because I'm too busy doing all that stuff. And then as an example of game team stuff, certainly after the launch of Pale, there's many fantastic things. One of the things though that sort of didn't really work out as well is just the magnitude of some of the tasks that fell on my plate. I mean, look, maybe if I was more competent, if I was better at doing things, that I would have been able to handle all of that. But realistically, I wasn't able to handle all of that. It was literally just too much. And what that then means is I'm bottlenecking people. And one of the biggest ways to burn out people on your team is to be a bottleneck. I mean, look into some of the research on burnout. So much of it is about people's sense of control, sense of agency within their own job. So if the person running the show, me, is overtasked, is struggling to focus, and has sort of stressed himself out to the point where he's just a bit more useless in every aspect of life. Yeah, well, I mean, maybe you could feel sorry for me. That doesn't fucking matter, because at the end of the day, I'm blocking you from doing things, and now you're having a way worse time. So ultimately what's happened there, and I suppose to go into names and details, that's something I'll properly do when we do announcements from our game team. But basically, more leadership, better division of tasks and responsibilities. And that's been a really positive thing. It's meant that I've been able to focus more on the things that I'm good at. It's meant that people are not being bottlenecked by me. And I think ultimately that means me being the bottleneck will no longer kill what we do. And I think it realistically could have in the past, because it just wasn't feasible. It just was not going to work, and I was absolutely burning out. That's definitely the lens through which I see what Johan has done, and it seems like a really good move to me. And if he is that strong creative force behind the likes of Helldivers, well, I think Helldivers has done an amazing job of creating culture. I mean, come on, you say manage democracy and everybody, everyone's in the joke, everyone gets it. They've done such a great job of that in their creative direction. If that means he can focus more on the game side of things, I think that's absolutely fantastic. Hopefully fantastic for people on his team who feel like they've got more access to a key collaborator in their work, and hopefully better for the players. So that's basically the story there. And just, I guess it's a positive story, and we've seen this sort of thing go wrong so many times that when it could be going right, I think it's absolutely, good to say, hey, that seems like a good thing. So that's the crack with that. I hope you found this to be interesting, and I guess I'd love to hear what your own personal experience with this sort of thing has been. I mean, I know it's the typical thing of like, you feel like you could get a lot more done if your boss was just out of your way, or, whatever it is. So I'd absolutely love to hear your experiences in the comments. So that's it. We'll be back with a video tomorrow. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you then.